What's up, heathens? How ya doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologists' claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Today, we're going to be taking a look back at a live stream that we did in May of this year. In it, we have these two guys who claim that atheists have double standards. Let's see what one of these jokers has.
Columbus didn't truly, in certain ways, did not discover the Americas. Therefore, Columbus didn't exist. This is the weird argument that I hear from many atheists upon YouTube, that if one miracle did not take place, then he didn't exist, as if any of the books of the New Testament were written out of whole cloth. They were not.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to go too well for him. But hey, could be wrong. If you heathens want to see if it goes well for either of these guys, then please stay tuned. So, let's see. This guy has a bone to pick with internet atheist double standards is what the title of the video is.
So George Washington never chopped down a cherry tree in order to display his honesty, saying, I cannot tell a lie.
First off, sir, please don't drink and drive. You're slurring. It sounds like maybe you've had one too many Coors Light, okay? I would highly suggest not, one, doing a video in your car while you're driving, two, drinking before you drive. I'm just saying.
Therefore, we must scrap the entirety of George Washington being an actual person who existed in history.
All right, so this is right up my alley, obviously, because we're talking about history. And no, just because there are myths or legends about real people in history does not necessarily mean that they were never real people. That's not even the tactic that you would take in order to suggest that Jesus didn't exist in history. The best that you could say is that the magical claims of the Gospels do not represent the real Jesus.
This is the same ludicrous non-argument that people say, well, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, then he didn't exist. Or if he wasn't born of a virgin, he didn't exist. As if those two religious beliefs have bearing on whether Jesus of Nazareth existed.
I agree that just simply Jesus not being born of a virgin and him not doing the magical things in the Bible do not necessarily mean that he doesn't exist. I would say that that definitely disproves the accounts of the Gospels, but that doesn't mean that some version of Jesus couldn't have existed. This is a straw man argument. It's also a false analogy because saying that about Jesus is not exactly the same thing about saying that about George Washington. For one thing, like, we don't have Gospels of George Washington. The best that you could say about the George Washington thing is that, well, that particular myth is not representative of actual history, which is pretty much the same thing that you would say about Jesus. I mean, those particular myths do not represent the real figure of Jesus. I don't really think that there's any atheist, especially 5 years ago, that's out there making these kinds of arguments. But, you know, I admit that there are some very simplistic kind of people out there that like to make broad, overgeneralizing statements like, oh, well, Jesus never existed because the Gospels are a myth or something like that. Simpletons. Yeah, simpletons is a nice word, I guess. So nobody really makes these arguments. So this is kind of a straw man thing for him to get upset about. I don't know where he got that from, but if anybody was making or were making these arguments at some point in time, I would suggest that they not do that.
It's beyond ludicrous. Benjamin Franklin didn't discover electricity. Therefore, he couldn't have existed. Columbus didn't truly, in certain ways, did not discover the Americas. Therefore, Columbus didn't exist.
Well, no, I mean, for one thing, those are obviously ridiculous statements. I mean, he's just basically blowing down a straw man argument because nobody is seriously making those kind of sweeping generalizations, or at least they shouldn't be. So his counterexamples here, I guess, would be good if you were actually arguing against somebody that was using those as arguments. But at this point, just imagine him in an empty field fighting with a scarecrow, and it's just like, oh, I got your picture right here. Pop! Fucking Benjamin Franklin, motherfucker. Pop! And the other guy, he didn't do it either. Pop!
This is the weird argument that I hear from many atheists upon YouTube, that if one miracle did not take place, then he didn't exist, as if any of the books of the New Testament were written out of whole cloth. They were not. It's a evangelical fundamentalist Protestant view of the New Testament where nothing's real, it's just all taken on faith.
Wait, it's a Protestant evangelical view that you got to take the New Testament purely on faith? I don't even know what particular position he's arguing from at this point. I have no idea which particular denomination of Christianity he's really a part of, because, I mean, he's shitting on Protestants and Catholics, and that pretty much covers them all, except for maybe the ones that say that, oh, well, I just follow Jesus. I'm not part of religion. I'm not part of Christianity. I just follow Jesus. It's like, well, that's part of Christianity. You're just non-denominational, I guess.
And there's no historical background to saying, well, because I was taught this my whole life, that there's no historical background to any of this and just has to be taken on faith. Well, then it's not real because it has to be taken on faith. No, Christianity does not believe this.
If you have to take something on blind faith without any kind of corroborating evidence to support it, then it would be silly to subscribe to that belief, because there's nothing to suggest that it's true. That doesn't mean that you can't believe it or shouldn't believe it or anything, but I just think that you should only believe things that comport with reality. I mean, if something doesn't comport with reality, if something isn't supported by real evidence, then maybe you shouldn't believe it.
For the vast majority of existence and the vast majority of people who call themselves Christians they think this is the stupidest thing in the world. It's only the loudest, craziest people in the United States that expound this, and for some reason, I
have no idea who is actually making this type of argument. So he says the loudest atheists are out there making this kind of argument, but I really don't understand who could be out there. Like, I haven't heard any loud atheists being like, you know what, Jesus wasn't born of a virgin, therefore that motherfucker didn't exist. Like, I haven't heard anybody out there shouting that.
Atheists on YouTube who are very stupid jump on this and use this non-argument.
Oh, okay. Stupid atheists. Sorry, hold on. This, for some reason, got all fucked up. All right, so that was a Christian of some kind. I don't know what kind, but that was a Christian. So now we're going to take a look at a video from a Muslim man. And this is this is during current, this was uploaded maybe 5 days ago or something like that. Apparently, atheists have a double standard when comparing the evidence for both bacteria and viruses and God, apparently.
I just want to send a message to the atheists. Atheists, how many times we were giving da'wah in outside stations in London, or even we go to Ireland, the brothers went to brothers in America. We Muslims giving da'wah to the atheists. They drove us crazy by saying to us, no, listen, we cannot see God. That's why we don't believe in God. So therefore, they restricted knowing something. To know something with certainty, you have to see it.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that you have to see it. I have heard some people say, well, we can't see God, so therefore I don't believe that he exists. Usually that's kind of an overgeneralization of what they mean. When I talk about this particular subject, I say there's no discernible evidence that shows that a God exists. That's a more precise and accurate way to describe what I feel like most atheists say when it's like, well, I can't see him, therefore he doesn't exist. There's no detectable evidence to suggest that he does exist. Whereas, with things that we don't necessarily perceive with our eyes, we can detect in other ways. Like, we can detect wind in various ways. We can detect, microscopic organisms in different ways. So, I would say that it's a overgeneralizing thing to say, well, we can't see God, therefore he doesn't exist. The more specific way is there's no evidence to suggest that he exists that we can determine.
But hold a minute now. Why many of us are scared to leave their houses because of coronavirus? We cannot see coronavirus. Okay? We cannot see it. But you're going to tell me, no, Muslim, calm down. We can see the effects of it. Likewise, the scientists, they seen it through microscope. I would say no. You just contradict yourself, because you said the only way to know something, not all of you, majority of you, which I spoke to, many brothers spoke to, the atheists are known for that. Majority of you say in order for you to know something with certainty, okay, you have to see it.
Well, I wouldn't say I would say to know that something exists with certainty, you would need some kind of detectable way in order to know that it does exist. So, I mean, the big difference here, of course, is that COVID, it has, we can image it and scientists have seen it. But, I mean, there are other ways that you can know that COVID-19 exists. There are the tests that people can get on occasion. That will test them for COVID-19. There's the antibodies that are produced by our bodies once you've had COVID-19. And just the way that the sickness sweeps through an area, you can know that this particular thing does exist. So there are other ways in which we can know. These would be not necessarily direct in that we're observing COVID-19 directly. They would be, I guess, more indirect ways. The problem with God, though, is that there are no indirect ways even to know that God exists. It's all very subjective to your own particular experiences as to whether or not you've gotten this evidence that God exists. It's personal experiences. It's like seeing somebody being healed with one leg that's shorter than another. That's actually a trick that a lot of these faith healers like to play. It's fairly easy to do. You can find videos all over YouTube about it. He's making a false analogy here between the evidence for both viruses and germs and diseases in general and the evidence for God. I mean, he thinks that the evidence for God is substantial and is like the indirect evidence that we have to suggest that God exists. I mean, he wants to consider those things to prove that God exists, but they don't actually prove that God exists. He's making a leap in his logic there in order to jump to his specific version of God.
And that is incorrect, because the meaning...
Oh, shit. Now I can't hear.
Something is not restricted in you have to observe it. No, there's other means. Now you have to accept there is coronavirus. Otherwise, you should not be speaking out against those who believe it's a conspiracy. By the way, I don't believe that, but I'm just saying that. Okay? But the point here is...
So, wait, he just made the argument that atheists who don't think that his evidence proves that his God exists should not be arguing against the conspiracy theorists who claim that COVID-19 is not real, it's caused by 5G radio waves or something like that, or it's like a false flag kind of thing. This is ridiculous to suggest. There's obvious quality differences in the evidence for both of these subjects. The evidence that you have for God does not necessarily prove that God does exist. There's no hard link there. You make a leap in logic in order to get to that conclusion. So your evidence really doesn't show what you think it shows. Whereas the evidence for COVID-19 is substantial and definitely proves that it exists.
I don't want to lose a track. Let us establish knowing something is not restricted. You have to see it. It's not conditional. You have to see it. So now you can see the effect of it. Yes, we agree.
I mean, I would agree with this particular part of it, that you can look at the effects of something to know that something happened or something exists. But still, he makes the leap in logic. I don't.
Otherwise, you're going to say that the scientists, they can see it through a microscope. So therefore, knowing something can be based upon the speech of the trustworthy ones.
Well, there is a level of trust developed between the general public and the medical professionals, but also it's not necessarily like a microscope. Viruses are typically too small to be even seen with a microscope. You have to use an electron microscope, which maybe is what he was talking about here, but even still, the big difference is we can take a fucking picture with it and we can see a visual representation of what the electron microscope shows us. You can't do that for God. You can't take a picture of God, okay? So there's vast differences in the evidence here.
Okay, likewise by the effect of something. Therefore, what about the effect of the Creator? There's nothing clearer than the effect of the Creator in His creation.
What are those effects? You mentioned His creation. I don't see any evidence of creation, so let's go with this argument from design.
The heavens and the earth and that which is between them. All of us, all this creation, give us clear-cut indication that there is a Creator, all-knowing, all knowledgeable and all powerful.
Well, no, this is just a personally incredulous statement. Just because you don't understand how life originated on this earth or how life diversified into various forms that exists in now does not mean that a God had to be there to create it. Just because something is complex doesn't mean that it needs a creator in order to make that complex thing. This is basically an argument from personal incredulity. It's an argument from design. Like, he's got a whole bunch of fucking fallacies all wrapped up into a nice little fucking shit package here.
Well, you can see the mercy and you can see the power that he can turn his mercy to his anger, the Most High. Likewise, let us go back to you are trusting scientists. You don't even know if they are trustworthy, they are liars, they've been they are working for some governments. You don't know, okay?
The medical community, like the scientific community, is supposed to be kind of indifferent as far as politics goes. That's why we have like the World Health Organization. We have these collaborative efforts with other countries on a scientific basis. Like, we don't like the Russians, but we've definitely paid the Russian Space Agency to boost our asses up to the ISS. There are various scientific collaborations that have happened between nations, regardless of what the political affiliation is of those nations. I mean, if you look at Antarctica, is that right, honey? But Antarctica has like a treaty signed by a whole bunch of different nations, and it's only going to be used for scientific purposes, regardless of political affiliations. I get that you don't necessarily trust these people unless you're going to go through the trouble of getting the advanced degrees needed and buy like an electron microscope just so that you can physically see the best that we can do, physically see the COVID-19 or any diseases or anything like that. Then unless you're going to go to that links, then you do have to trust people on some kind of level. You say you don't believe in these conspiracy theories, but then you're trying to weave this conspiracy theory about scientists. So these are mixed messages that you're sending here there, bud.
Prophets and messengers. So prophets and messengers historically were known amongst their nations to be trustworthy, truthful, honest people. You see, even though they never met each other, they came with the same teaching. So therefore, all atheists, knowing something is not restricted only. You have to see it. It's not conditional. Also, you are London, America.
He reminds me right now of the food workers that like the servers and stuff that work with food, and they have to wear like a hairnet on their beards. I mean, you wearing your mask, I get that you're doing a video. Why do you have to be outside doing a video with like your mask halfway pulled down and like subjecting yourself either to getting COVID-19 or, it possibly infecting other people if you have it? I don't understand why you got to do that. This is an incredible display of ignorance throughout this entire video on multiple levels.
Seriously, what the fuck are you doing?
England or UK, America, France, people are scared to leave their houses. If you look out the window, you don't know what you're scared of because you cannot see coronavirus. So, but you see the effects of it. Likewise, you're taking the narrations of the people. What about the prophets and messengers that Allah sent with the clear-cut proofs? Rather, the proofs that the Muslims have to establish there is a creator and Islam is the truth is overwhelming and is a powerful, solid proofs. Alhamdulillah.
Well, that's because I don't think that your evidence proves that your particular version of God exists. So, I mean, yeah, true, you think that you have all this evidence, but it really doesn't prove your position. In this video, you brought up like the argument from design that, everything in nature, everything in this reality speaks to a creator. That's you assuming that. It comes from a personally incredulous place because you don't understand how the complex processes of reality work. You don't understand the complex processes of a fucking plant. You don't understand the complex process of evolution over millions of years. You don't understand it, therefore God exists. It's a classic personally incredulous argument, and it's fallacious. Just because you don't understand how something works doesn't mean that God must have done it or some ambiguous creator must have done it. And all of the arguments that Muslims have, that Christians have, and both of these arguments prove different gods. This is no way to actually go about and being able to discern truth. If you have a set of proofs that show two different results, it shows that you really don't know what in the fuck you're talking about. Like, you have no way to discern between the two. The gaps for God's existence keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's no wonder that God now resides in the personally incredulous portions of our knowledge. I would caution anybody that makes, sort of broad generalizing statements like, oh, we can't see God, therefore he doesn't exist. I would try to be a bit more specific in what you say. I'm not even going to deal with that first video that we watched because that's an obvious straw man argument. But in this one, be a bit more specific and say that, well, the evidence does not suggest that a God does exist, which one piece of that evidence would be like, well, where the fuck is he? I don't see fucking God. Like, he ain't come down here and tell me to, shut the fuck up kind of thing.
No, heathens, I don't think it went well for either of them. Not a bit. Thank you, heathens, for watching today. If you will, go down below, let me know what you thought about this video in the comments. Hey, while you're down there, why don't you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.